Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are talking Incubus Dig, and this is going to be a tutorial of how to play the entire song. And a bit later on I'm going to show you how I created the tones for this track as well. So it'd be a bit of a geeky deep dive into what pedals I'm using and all the amp sims that I'm using as well. But first off, let's dive into the intro and the verse part of this song, and I'll show you how to play through it. Right, so let's dive straight into the intro and the verse for Incubus Dig. Now, the chords that are being played or that are being arpeggiated, they are kind of governed by the kind of acoustic guitar in the background. So the first chord is the cowboy chord E. And then it goes up to an F sharp bar chord and then a C sharp minor bar chord. So the F sharp is a major. And that's what we're referencing here. So I've got some reverb and delay going on. I'll go through all the tones later, but just know that I've got those on for these parts, or the intro part. So we're starting up on the 14th fret with our first finger on the D string, and then our ring and little finger are coming up on the 16th fret on the B and E strings, and you've got this. So that pattern, I'm using my pick and my middle finger to play these parts. Now, if you watch Mike play it live, he will use his pick and his middle finger and his ring finger. I find with my ring finger, it's not as kind of strong, so I don't get a clear note. You can by all means play it that way. You can just pick this if you want. It's an awfully long way for your pick to travel, so that's why the hybrid picking really helps here. So I'm playing it, I'm starting with a pick stroke on the D string for the first note, then my middle finger on the B, then back to the pick on the 16, and then my middle finger again on the high E, and then again on the B. And then you cycle around that D and B string before playing the high E and back to the B again. So I'll play it slowly through. Before finally finishing on that D string and the B string. Then we transition to this shape, which is an F sharp sus2 chord. So we're going from our first finger on the D to our second finger up on the 16 on the D string. Our first finger is coming back onto the 14 on the B string, and our third finger or ring finger is coming on the 16 on the high E. And then we play a similar pattern before we take our middle finger up one string, so from the D to the A, still on the 16th fret, which then becomes a C sharp power chord, so it's a C sharp 5 chord. But then we're only playing the A, the B, and the E string. And then we just let that trail off a little bit before we start the riff again. So only that E that you start with has the most notes. When the song starts and for the second verse, you've got a slight variation on that, which is just simply your little finger coming up to the 18th fret and pulling off to that 16th fret. And again, you let that ring out and the delay trails to keep going to lead you back round again to. So it's a little bit of a tricky change. It's best to lead with kind of your middle finger here, get that down first, and then your first finger, and then your third finger following underneath because of the way the picking pattern is. So as you're playing the D and then the B strings first, it makes sense to follow in that order. Once you get your fingers used to it, it's quite an easy change. And then you simply just move up one string to the A to play that last part. So from there, we have the trickier chorus part, which I'm using a bit more gain. I've taken the reverb off and I've put on the MXR Phase 90. And there is a bit of a delay part going on, which again, I'll talk about a bit later. So this, we were actually referencing a lot of chords here. It carries around this G sharp sus2 chord. So that is starting at the 13th fret on the G with my third finger. My first finger is coming back onto the 11th fret on the B string, and we play. So you pick the G, pick the B, pick the G again before finishing on the D string. Again, I use my first finger here because we're coming back to this shape as the next part. So it's a bit faster than having to kind of change your whole hand around. You can use your third finger if you really want to, but I find that because then we're sliding back to the 11th fret to make a C sharp 6 sort of shape. So that next part, you start picking on the B string, still on the 11th fret. B to D and then D back to B, so it kind of flips there. To start with, you let all of those notes ring out against one another as well. When we come back to the 11th fret on the D with my second finger and the 11th fret on the B with my third finger, see, I'm lifting my fingers off there, so you're playing the individual notes. It's not letting them bleed together, whereas at the start, you want those notes to ring out over each other. As we slide back, then comes the first sort of tricky part of this. So from this C sharp 6, we're playing through like a C sharp sus2 here. So that's a slide up to the 16th fret on the B string. I like to slide, because my third finger is already down here at the 11th, I like to slide up with my third finger, play the 14th on the B with my first finger, and then switch to hammering back on to the 16th on the B, but with my middle finger. So you've got this stretch under your fingers then. So your little finger can come up onto the 18th fret on the G, which is this octave note on the B string, which is a C sharp. The same note. And then you can use your middle finger to basically play the notes that you need in between. So if we put that together slowly, and then there, once you've played that, you're then playing these two notes in unison, so the octave notes, before hammering down and lifting off. So play the G and the B strings together before just playing the B string when it's down on the 16th fret. And then play both the G and the B together again to get that note ringing back out. If that's a difficult stretch for you, you could just sit on the 14th instead. You don't have to have that that extra note in there, as it's the same note. But watching Mike play it live, that is definitely what he is doing. So if that's a difficult stretch, you could do entirely up to you. From there, we come back to that G sharp sus2 again. Everything sort of repeats, starts again with that. And then we come down to and that is essentially just running down sort of a G sharp minor pentatonic. So it starts on the 11th fret on the D string. And then slides down to the 8th fret, still on the D, before coming down to the 6th and then the 4th, and running back sort of between the 6th and the 4th Now, I don't think Mike plays all of those notes that I slide between. That for me just kind of caps off that riff a bit more. He seems to play a little bit less, but I just like that seems to complete that more for me, but I think he just plays something like that. You can experiment around there. I mean, I'm not being too anal about it. I think part of this is making it your own to some extent and having fun with it. So all of that together. Back up to that G sharp sus2 again. Back to that C sharp 6 again. And then you're sort of running around an E major 7 sort of part before going back to that G sharp sus2 again. So that little bit from the C sharp 6, again, playing those notes individually. And these you let ring together. So we're starting on the 9th fret on the G string with our first finger, play that, and then play the B at the 12th fret with your little finger, back to the G at the 9, then play the high E with your little finger, before running down to the 11 on the high E with your third finger, and then bar with your first finger, so you're playing the high E on the 9th fret before coming back again to that 9th fret on the G. It's constantly coming back to that note. And then finally, we finish on sort of a B5, B power chord, which then kind of goes to this like B major 7, I guess, before finishing on this A sharp sort of flat 5 with a slow bend up. So that last part, first finger on the 12th fret of the B string, third finger on the 14th fret of the high E. And again, you're letting these all ring out together. And then let the two strings ring out together. And you just hop back one fret with your first finger. And then your second finger comes down on the high E on the 12th fret before, as I say, bending up slowly as you play those notes. Then the last kind of chorus part, once it does the chorus the second time, after you've done it goes back to that before we go into the solo, and at the very end of the song it goes around that 3 times before it finishes on. And you can stamp your delay on there to kind of let the delay repeats ring out and stab the note, or you can just let that note ring out. But from there we go into the solo. Now the solo was very much a studio kind of thing on the recording. There is a reversed version on YouTube, which is quite cool. You can hear the solo actually forwards instead of backwards, and it sounds kind of just like random pentatonic notes. I'm not 100% sure. I've done more what he does live, which is more like tremolo picked going down at sort of the G minor pentatonic scale essentially. So with this I've got delay on, a little bit of reverb, and the phase 90 is still on, and I'm starting on the 11th fret, the high E, and then that goes down from the 11th to the 8th fret to the 6th, 4th, and then 2nd in sort of quick succession. And then when I get down to the 2nd, it's like this slow, gradual bend up before kind of hooking my finger over onto the second fret on the B string and then playing. So that's just simply sliding backwards and forwards between the second fret and the fourth fret before finishing on the second fret. Then we slide up to the ninth fret, back to the seventh, up to the 11th on the B. This is all still on the B string before finishing on that ninth fret again, which sounds like. Without the tremolo picking, if that's a bit tricky for you, you could just play single notes instead. So in my head, before the tremolo picking, I was thinking in terms of like. That's quite a nice melody that you could kind of hum and sing along to yourself. It's loosely based on what Mike does live, but I've added kind of my own flavor to it. So you can take, you know, those kind of notes or do something slightly different and kind of make it your own, really. It doesn't have to be too strictly followed of anything. And that is all the guitar parts. So for those of you that are just interested in the tutorial, I thank you for watching this video. For those of you that want to know about the tones and amp sims that I've used and pedals that are used and the settings and all that kind of stuff, check that out. I'll talk about that now. Right, so hopefully you have a good idea of how to play through Incubus Dig now and all those various parts. Now let's dive into my DAW and I'll show you my whole signal path, so the amp sims that I'm using and what pedals they're coupled with for each part. So if we start with the bass sound here, you can see that I am using, it's basically a Vox AC30 plugin, which is made by Nembrini Audio. I really like their stuff. I'm not affiliated with these guys or any of this gear whatsoever. This is just stuff I've kind of found on my own. I read a good article from Ultimate Guitar like way back that was saying that Mike was still using the Voxes and the Marshalls in this era of Incubus around the Light Grenades time. I'm just using the normal side of things here, so not the brilliant, not the ultra bright one, and it's set at 7.1, so it's got a bit of bite to it. It's quite a nice clean sound, not overly clean but still cleanish. The treble is set at 5, the bass at 2.6. The tone cut is at 4.9, so that removes some of the higher frequencies as you turn it up, and it adds it back in the lower it goes. And then if we look at mics and cab wise, I'm using the standard kind of Vox AC30 cab that comes with this. Shure SM57 off axis, and quite close mic'd, and then a ribbon mic that's a bit further away to add in a bit more bass. The levels of them are set quite even here, and a little bit of ambient room sound in there as well. I am using the cleaner up here, so I'm getting rid of some of the bass frequencies, and I'm toning down some of the treble side of things as well. This is a really handy tool on their stuff. I really like it. You can kind of cut frequencies quite nicely. I'm not using the noise gate, and the output is set appropriately. This is Archetype Petrucci from Neural DSP, and I'm just using, you see everything else here is turned off, which is a really nice feature of this. You don't have to have everything on. And I've just got the pedals section on here, and I'm just using the overdrive, which would be like a tube screamer type pedal. The drive is really low. The tone is just a little bit brighter, about 1 o'clock. And the level is pretty much at 12, just back from, so it's not pushing the amp overly hard. Then on top of that, I have another Archetype Petrucci, but this time I'm only using the kind of post effects, which are like rack effects here, and I'm just using the reverb. It's a really nice reverb. So it's quite big. That sounds like this. So if you have your own reverb pedal, I mean, this would be like putting it in an effects loop. So this is coming right after everything else. So all the amp and the cab and everything else. If it's in the front of the amp, like Mike would normally like to do, I find it colors the sound too much and it muddies everything up. I wanted the reverb to sit kind of underneath everything else, but to each their own, you know, it's up to you. You don't have to have the reverb on there. Then after that, I've just got a simple EQ, which looks like this. So I'm playing around with some more of the higher frequencies here that I'm shelving quite a lot of, around 9K, and then taking out some of the 3.2, taking out some of the 1.6, taking out quite a lot of the 400, and then I've got a kind of a low cut here as well, which is quite a lot at 100. So I don't want this too bassy. I want Ben's bass part to shine through. This you can ignore. It's just for when after I've recorded it, I'm just adding a bit of compression to the sound. You don't have to have compression on to play this track at all. And the last piece of this puzzle is the delay pedal, which I am actually using a pedal for, which is the Boss RV3. I'll show you how that sounds, and then I'll talk about all the settings for that in a second. So with that pedal on, it sounds like this. So you can hear the trails in the background there. It's quite subtle. Now that's how the verse part I have built the verse part up. Now, if you have the same pedal as me, the Boss RV3, which Mike is very famous for using, the settings for that are the balance is at 8 o'clock. So it's kind of pulled right back so it's not overshadowing the track. Otherwise it can get quite distracting. The feedback is at 11:30. The delay time is at 1:30, and that's on mode 2. And the feedback, you want to get it into kind of a nice spot where it's not really noticeable, but you want it to kind of carry on for a decent amount of time. So it's a bit of a balance act there. Now, for anyone out there that has a pedal that uses milliseconds instead of just a delay time knob or anything where you can be a bit more accurate, I've worked out that it's about 384.62 milliseconds is where you want to be at. So if you use a pedal that uses milliseconds, or you have a plugin that does, dial that in and you should find that that should be pretty good to go. Now for the chorus side of things, all the amp settings and everything else are exactly the same, but all I'm doing, the EQ is the same as well. All I'm doing on here is pushing the overdrive a little bit more. So the drive is higher, the tone is way up. It's adding a lot more treble into this. It's quite a biting sound in the chorus. And then the level is pushed a bit higher as well, so it's driving the amp harder. And I've also got on the MXR Phase 90 on my pedal board at a very slow sort of sweep. The dial is set at about 10 o'clock, and it sounds like this. What you can hear is anything that I record into this signal is then being fed on the right-hand side here. If I open this up, I have the Archetype Petrucci again, but this time I'm only using the delay section. It's set to half of 384.62, which is what you would need for the main verse delay part. So it's quite a slapbacky kind of delay. And then I've also pushed up the dry wet as well over to the more of the wet side, so it's kind of really delaying that sound when it comes back through, but it gives this really nice sort of stereo sound. So in the left speaker you've got it immediately with the Phase 90, and then in the right you've got it again, but almost just that split second later, and it combines to have this really, really nice effect. From what I can tell, there is on YouTube a video of the isolated guitar part that someone has put up, and to me that's what it sounds like is how it was recorded. So I've tried to emulate the same thing there essentially. So for you playing at home, I would just use the MXR Phase 90 and not worry about the delay. But if you have the kind of setup like I do and you want it to be as close as possible, give that a go. Now for the solo section, it's the same settings as what I've done for the chorus, so it's a little bit more distorted, but then I also have the MXR Phase 90 still on and the delay pedal on as well. So it's like this. The only difference from the chorus part is that I'm adding a touch of reverb with the Petrucci plugin again. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you gave me a like. That would really help get this video out into the world. If you would like to support my channel, I have links to my Patreon page down below in the description. I can't monetize a lot of my videos because of the copyright that's involved, so they're just ineligible for monetization. So over on my Patreon, I do have all the tabs for every cover that I've made, and there are exclusive videos or exclusive tutorials like this over there as well for various different Incubus songs. You can buy t-shirts from my Spring store, which you can see below this video, and Here's one of the t-shirts here, the delay t-shirt. There's the say thanks button, which is underneath this video, where you can just pledge a one-off amount of money to me, which is through YouTube, which would be hugely appreciated. Or there are affiliate links in the description as well. So for any of these pedals, not the amp sims or anything, I don't get any commission for those, but for any pedal links, I do get a very small commission. Any way you could help out my channel would be hugely appreciated. And I thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.